Thanks for coming out to our Startup Grind event. Startup Grind's a global networking group for startup companies. Started out in Silicon Valley. It'll be the 10-year reunion next year. And now there's 500 different chapters around the world that host fireside chat, panel events, and workshops every month. And we're really excited you guys to come out. We have an amazing, exciting panel tonight on hiring and recruiting for your startup company. We're sponsored, we have several sponsors and partners that make this possible. One of them is Brex, which is the first corporate credit card for startups. You've probably seen them on the subways and trash cans and everywhere they can advertise. They have a really unique approach that lets startup companies actually get a credit card where they'd be turned down by banks by using the financing they've gotten from investors as a way into getting your own credit card. We're also sponsored by the Verizon 5G Challenge. If you have an IoT device or anything that runs on the 5G network, definitely check it out. It's a $1 million challenge that they're giving in giveaways to startup companies in that space that compete in the challenge. I have several partners, including Kraus, who's a marketing and digital agency that's actually taking our videos and is going to create some amazing content from tonight that we can share on all of our social channels. Speaking of that, you can follow us at Startup Grind Boss, BOS, on any Instagram, Twitter, whatever you like to use. My company, Prepare for VC, is another partner that helps startups through the fundraising process with pitch decks, business plans, and other materials. We also partner with whatever service you're looking for. Startup Grind probably has a partner with website design and development. We use Zyk and 9 Series, and we have other partners. If you're looking for something, just let us know and we'll be happy to make an introduction. And with that, I'd like to introduce or give some time for our panelists to introduce themselves and tell you about. We want to hear both the backstory of Everett and Mike here, how they got into the hiring space and into their current roles at J&HR and Workable, and then also what the a little bit of background on the companies themselves as we go into the chat and some questions.
Great, thanks, Jason. Good evening, and excited to be here, and also at Workable, which we work with a lot of our clients use Workable, and it's a great platform for powering our hiring process. So how I got into the hiring talent acquisition space, ever since I was a 4-year-old, just HR, talent acquisition, come on, people. It's funny how you end up at certain places, and then as you invest time and energy into you do get more passionate about it. But after college, I spent the first decade of my career really powering the talent acquisition processes and even the back end too of multi-branch staffing firms around the United States. So spent a lot of time in that industry, specifically on the technology side, implementing these ERP systems. Another thing, since I was 4, just always wanted to get into ERP. That's a joke. I think 6 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I do understand people are probably talking about HR, very exciting. But I spent a lot of time in that space. I found that after the Great Recession, which gets everybody sort of kind of taking stock, right? You're like, wow, that was dramatic and terrible, and you start considering other alternatives and just kind of trying to take a broader view at things. Me and a few partners just started looking at broader industries outside of staffing and started talking to first recruiters, but then HR people, but eventually hiring managers and business owners, and just realized how broken the hiring process was and how frustrating it was for so many different people, and how within your typical staffing model, that model doesn't always actually align great with the employer or with a growing venture in terms of the qualitative components to it, the cost components to it. So just started looking more broadly at, well, how can we solve the actual hiring problem for the business owners and for founders, which kind of led us down this track towards where we ended up landing was founding Jane.hr, which I'm a co-founder of, with really a core focus on helping companies make better hires under the simple assumption that better talent leads to truly better companies. And so as we work with founders, we understand that hiring, in many cases, on one hand, is a pain in the ass to people. It's true. It's time consuming. It's difficult. It's often, you're trying to press into growth. Growing sales, product development, product launch, and then there's this what seems like this administrative time suck. But at the same time, hiring and also just the whole talent management process, it can be a very powerful lever for your business in terms of supporting your growth strategy, but even opening up new opportunities. So we really partner with ventures on a few different levels. One is in providing, kind of helping meet the urgent needs and providing in-sourced hiring specialists who can help establish a hiring process, if necessary, manage it for our clients in a more cost-effective manner than kind of a typical headhunter model would be. And then we'll also provide more consultative services around really helping align talent strategy with the growth strategy, looking at the infrastructure that is in place, putting it in place if it's not in place, and really helping calibrate things so that our clients really end up with a solid talent engine that they can really help meet their urgent needs, but also scale their companies for the future. So that's Jane.hr, and that's, I guess, a bunch of years in a short intro.
Sounds great.
Beautiful. Thanks for that. And thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here. So my name is Mike Manzi. I actually run the sales team here at Workable. So only a few 20 feet or so behind this wall is where I work. So here's where I got started. So actually, I started my career when I was in 10th grade, where I decided that the NSYNC album, the second album that came out, No Strings Attached, was good, but there's also good songs from the first album. How am I going to listen to all the songs with 1 to 2 CDs? I had a CD burner and ended up starting to sell burned CDs of NSYNC's greatest hits in what was probably 1998. And what was interesting about that, though, was I sold them for $10 a piece, and I thought for sure I knew who my customers are. It's gonna be all the girls in my grade. NSYNC's really big with people in that, and all the girls in my grade. Well, it turns out there's a bunch of secret NSYNC fans, and they were all the guys in my grade. So for the first time, I actually learned that you never know your customer. So that's where I got started in sales. And then after graduating from college, not too far away from here, I went to EF, which is a great company that helps all the high schools travel and send their kids abroad. And then did some traveling myself, spent about a year in Korea teaching English. And then after that, really bounced around from Chicago to New York to outside of Philadelphia, and as well as Boston. But what's interesting about the experiences that I've had is actually because at each of these companies, it was anything between seed companies, Series A companies, Series C companies, companies getting sold, and companies that were truly mature companies like a career builder. And so what that's allowed me to do is actually understand the different hiring challenges for different companies at completely different times in their life cycle. So one of the reasons I'm excited to talk today is for that reason right there. I've had to hire people where we were backed by Kickstarter, and also had to hire people where we were, 20-year-old company making millions of dollars and everywhere in between. But what's brought me here to Workable, and I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards about us more, but in a gist here. So Workable is an HR software, and what we like to say is we're actually a destination. We're sort of where the world hires. And here's why we say that. So there's been over 20,000 companies that have used Workable in over 90 countries. What they've done is they've actually made over 1 million hires, and they've made these hires by looking at over 35 million candidates. Now, what's interesting about Workable is we've actually taken the learnings from those 35 million candidates, from those million hires, from those 20,000 companies, and we've actually built it back into Workable, our platform, which means it's in the hands of all people like you. All people that are making hires, you guys wouldn't it be great if you could learn from 1 million people that were hired? Well, you actually can using Workable. But taking a step back, if I could, I think what's an interesting thing that we should make sure that we keep in mind too is the market and the position that we're all in. When you're hiring for a startup, and I'm sure everybody who's doing this would agree, I hope so, the first thing you have as a challenge is your boss. Because your boss just got a check for $50 million or $10 million or $1 million or 20 grand from his friends and family. And he or she is asking you to make the hires and make them as fast as possible. That person knows that every salesperson that doesn't get hired by a month, that can be $50,000 in lost revenue. If every marketing person gets hired, that's 50 leads. If every person in HR gets hired, that can be a lawsuit. So they know every single hire is super critical. And so you go to move really quick. But the challenge is, when you're looking for people right now, most of the people that you're looking for, or some of them you're looking for, are competing for jobs that didn't even exist 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? And so where do you find those people? And how do you possibly say what level of experience they need? And who are you to say, to interview for them? So you then find out the people you're looking for are typically now, the fate of all of our companies is in the hands of millennials and Gen Z. Now, there's plenty of articles out there to talk about how every generation is different, but what's important about these people is that they are super picky, and just like you or I look at a review on Yelp and say, I don't know, 4.3, is it worth it? They look at your company and say, hey, do I really want to work here? So you have that challenge, and so what we're seeing is companies going to companies like Jane and other companies because they need help from HR. And so what I'm hoping we can do today is talk to you about how we can give you guys some tips to find good talent, because at Workable and with our customers, what we find is that when you're in a tough market and when you have to lean on HR that typically has antiquated tools and doesn't know the market as well as maybe you might, because you might have just created the market, you might end up having to hire some subpar people. And I think if there's nothing else that we say today, it would be the most important thing you have in your business. Forget your product, forget your partners and everything else, or the people that are there, because they're actually your product. So I'm hoping we can give you guys some tips on that. I know we've done it here at Workable, so that's what we're doing.
Perfect. Yeah, great introductions, and amazing stories about how you got to where you are now. You guys have both had sort of an entrepreneurial journey from selling CDs into working at other startups into like corporate positions at Workable and other companies here. And then you've had Eric, you're a co-founder now of a startup that's helping other startups recruit, and you've had roles as an employee as well. So just wondering, taking that leap into the recruiting side, what are some of the things, surprises you've seen that you've seen this is the way companies really hire people, and some surprises or things you've seen in the market that that people wouldn't really expect.
I've seen a lot of things. I think that are you talking more from a job posting standpoint? Or just in general?
Posting or hiring, like,
Yeah.
recruiting standpoint.
Something that I know, I believe Salesforce does this, and I've taken this as part of my approach, is sending thank yous before a candidate sends you a thank you. I think it's been a big help for me to get people to believe in Workable when maybe the package or the offer isn't as good as whatever they have from some other company. From a hiring standpoint, what I've also seen is a lot more people focusing on social. It's a lot of things, that's what we do here, a lot of Workable too, is really focusing on how do we get to people on Facebook and Instagram. So reaching out to people on those platforms has been a big change. And I think that the other thing that I've seen is I'm sure you'd agree too, is a lot of new software is coming out in the HR space in the last 5 years or so, because this has been typically a space where things have been slow, clunky, not the best process, typically the organization that gets the last bit of the money before sales and marketing bites it all up. So I think they're finally getting their bite of the pie, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think for me, it deals a lot with just human nature in general, and I'm very fascinated just by role conception. Like when a company realizes we need to hire somebody, or how they come to that realization, and even internally, it's like, you know, we have to hire our own internal staff, and because we're a hiring company, we know what we should do, but there's still this natural pressure to be like, okay, we just need to get somebody, you know?
Yeah.
And you just see this human nature come into play where it's everything, the pressure, all these factors are just playing against the process where, like, I know what I should do, and I'm fighting the urge to just go the opposite direction of that and try to quickly just dust off some old job description, post it, and just find somebody, you know? Or just try to bring in people that we already know and not do a more thorough search. So I think there's just a common sense aspect where it shouldn't be surprising, but it's, in one respect, it's just looking internally at ourselves and what, despite having all the knowledge of what we should be doing, the temptation against that, as well as though, like, a lot of the companies that we do work with, just looking at, I do think, like, just the ad hoc way that roles do get created, even in very established organizations, where you think that, oh man, they're putting the latest science and analysis together to figure out, job analyses to figure out these roles. It's like, no, some, you know, head of this department, you know, says they need to hire somebody, so they find a job posting on Indeed, copy paste it, and post it, you know, it's kind of like as advanced as things could be. In the end, we're still, by and large, when you look at the core process, doing things the way we've always been doing them, which is, like, it shouldn't be surprising, but it kind of is surprising. So I don't know if that's what you were looking for as an answer, but that's what comes to mind right now.
No, definitely. Yeah, and then, you know, as an employer making, or, you know, using your firm or your platform, you know, what are some of the features they should be looking for in creating their job posting and their listing that'll attract, like, either the most candidates or the most qualified candidates, and, like, you know, yeah, some things they can add in or filter out that'll sort of get them to the right person they're looking to hire.
Well, and I do think, and this is what, I mean, internally we've had to be disciplined with, and we be disciplined with our clients when we're engaging with them, is it is critical we would say to really think through your ideal candidate profile. The temptation's going to be to just try to quickly put something out there. Or let's put something out there, let's make it as attractive as possible. But how well is that end product actually anchored in a realistic assessment of what you need? And ideally, I think it's really important sometimes to start with the end in mind. So an exercise that we'll sometimes do is say, imagine you have the right person in this role or this situation. Let's go to a year down the road. The right person, they're fully ramped up. Like, what does that new reality look like for you? Like, and not so much what are they doing, like what are you now able to do, or what objectives are you hitting, or what performance is your organization hitting or your department hitting, and kind of actually going to that place, maybe 3 to 5 bullet points, just quickly like describing viscerally that reality. And then you can actually work your way backward, reverse engineer it in a way to, well, what's the type of person or the type of people that I'm gonna have to bring on that are gonna actually help us create that reality. So in a way, it's not, it's kind of doing some initial role conception work before just jumping right into the job ad. But one piece of advice would just be, don't just jump into the job ad. Do some of that heavy lifting up front, because you'll be a lot more on point by the time you get to the job ad. But then from that, if you reverse engineer it and you formulate your ideal candidate profile, you'll actually have a better picture of who you're writing your job ad to. Because job ads are written to people, which is common sense, but when you see a lot of the job ads out there, which sometimes really are just actually formal job descriptions that people just post as job ads that include things like, must be able to sit at a keyboard for 8 hours and type. Which may be important from a compliance standpoint to have in your job descriptions. You don't need to go into a job ad. But by the time you get to the job ad point, it's good to be writing to a person. Sometimes I would even recommend, sometimes we'll just pull up a few LinkedIn profiles of people that we think could fit well for this role ahead of time, and kind of just have those personas in our head and be writing to those people. So that would just be one, simple piece of advice for as you begin to formulate your job ads.
Yeah. Can't agree more, and you're right, it's nothing, people aren't doing this with this big formula. Workable, I believe, is the most visited HR site in the world, and the #1 thing people are searching is job descriptions. So people are looking to just copy and paste the job descriptions from us like they do from Indeed and everywhere else. So I think there's 3 things that I'll try to touch on. One is to be specific, one is to talk about your company, and the other is to try to weed people out with the posting itself. So what I've seen a lot of in terms of job postings is they're either generic job descriptions, like you mentioned, or they're overselling the company, or in hypergrowth, there's so many cool things, and then copy paste every single thing in the job description is the same as it could be anywhere. So brief story, so my wife actually applied to 200 jobs in New York when we were in New York for 9 months. And so she got looked at a lot of job postings. Every time she'd come home, or I'd come home and she'd say, you know what? I fit perfectly for this job. All of the criteria I match. And I'm like, that's not how it works though. It's not just this company creating check boxes, whoever takes off 10 of the check boxes gets the job. And that, I think, is the first piece. If the jobs were actually more specific to say, here's what you need to do and what we expect of you, then there's several jobs that you would apply for and wouldn't apply for because you have that information. So that sort of leads to the last thing I mentioned, which was trying to weed people out. Well, if this job requires you to think on your feet, maybe don't have the job description just say, think on your feet, but have it require that person to do something that would require them to think. So a better example of this might be, In a startup, a lot of times what you need is somebody who can deal with ambiguity. But what I found hiring people for startups is that a lot of times you find people that want the startup culture and the coolness and the t-shirts, but they actually also want the structure and the promotion paths and the stability of a large company. Now, if in the job description, however, we were saying things like, there's a lot of change and people are wearing tons of different new hats, that person who wants stability is probably not gonna apply for that job because they're gonna think, I really don't want that. Now, I think we're all familiar with this by using words like rockstar and everywhere else to say, we're looking for A players that are only the best and everything else, and you're perfect, 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 to try to weed out people that aren't perfect, perfect, perfect. But that actually just weeds out different types of people. Right now, we're actually, our team is about, in this whole company is about 50% female, 50% male, and I think one of the reasons is we try to use language that's intentional to make sure that we're not weeding people out accidentally by saying we want you to be a rock star #1 A player and not weeding out people that maybe just aren't extroverts. We want to make sure that we are saying there's a lot of change and things are happening here and you got to be able to think on your feet so that we don't get people that are looking for tons of structure and require that. The last thing I'll say here though is about the company. I think that the biggest thing we missed is like you said, Everett, it's the realizing you're talking to a person and realizing also that this is a two-way street. I think we very quickly roll into the I'm in control, you're not in control relationship. And so we say, here's our awesome company, you should apply because it's incredible. I just told you how amazing we are and we just want you. But we need to really focus on what's in it for the person. So if your company doesn't have all these cool, fancy benefits and you don't have ping pong tables or whatever else is cliche, don't mention that. And don't say that you're a cool office because you have a tap, right? Actually say what's going on. Hey, we rolled out 60 new features this year. This is a market that has been saturated and we're actually breaking through. We've actually promoted over half of our people. Those are interesting things people want. Like, what are you looking for in your next job? You want to get promoted, you want to be supported, you want to make more money, you want to be more successful. So talk about how your company is going to get you promoted, get you more money, get you more successful. And not about how you guys have a cool thing in the kitchen.
Yeah, those are great responses, and like sort of building off of that. As you're looking through candidates or recruiting for a company, like just if you have 20 identical resumes or like pretty close candidates, how do you look for and filter for some of the other aspects like the culture fit and other things you're looking for in a candidate that might not come through as much on a resume?
Yeah, so a lot of times, it depends on the role. Let's talk about engineers, for instance. If you're hiring for junior level engineers, you have a lot more flexibility in what you can ask for up front. Whereas if you're hiring for senior level engineers, I guess I was gonna say you may get the finger if you ask for too much, but you just won't get anything. It'll just be crickets. So how much information you have to work off of kind of depends on like who you're hiring, the level of the role. So the resume though is only, when somebody's applying for the role or when you're reaching out to somebody, there's a lot of different options in terms of what you can get from somebody beyond just the resume. Sometimes the good old-fashioned cover letter, especially just for roles that require a decent amount of professional communication, is good to ask for. Like, why not ask for a cover letter? Other times it can be portfolios. Other times it can be, if you're using an ATS like Workable, you can have people answer a few questions. Again, keep in mind that people applying for a job it's like internet marketing. The more, it's like a form. The more questions you ask, the fewer people come through. So you're trying to find that right balance from, so one important piece is to know your funnel, or at least to be able to get a quick sense of your funnel from a candidate flow standpoint and adjust. So if you put something out there, you have all these great questions that you want people to fill out, and it's crickets, then you might want to start adjusting how much what your ask is. But certainly for certain, you just have a lot of options from resume to portfolios to writing samples to other types of work samples that you can gather, to questions that you can ask when people are applying. Or you can set things up where when somebody applies, you can have a either automated response or a manual response that can quickly just ask somebody, you get somebody to apply, so you capture their resume, but then you can have a quick follow-up that goes out to get maybe a little bit more information from them. So, and the other piece I would say is just, it's like for every company we're working with, we formulate a checklist, a resume, sort of like this is the criteria we're going to be using to assess. We do this at different stages, but assess, kind of the resume review stage or the application review stage. And a checklist allows you to do a few different things. One, it helps you just stay consistent and not, and reduces bias. You're treating everybody the same way, so there's consistency. Two, it actually makes it easier to hand it off to somebody. So, so if you can get it out of your head into a checklist, then you can have somebody else help out with the resume review. And then three, it does actually lead to more just efficiency because, sometimes, you can, I'm working on some sales outreach, and then, a resume comes in. Let me look at this resume, and then, I'm gonna go back to sales outreach. But a checklist can kind of help you just engage with reviewing, pounding through 20 to 30 people quickly, and then switching back to the other 20 things that you were working on. So that's kind of how I would just approach the whole resume review stage, and just differentiating one thing from another. And also like prioritizing, it's not necessarily that like who's the one person I should reach out to, but it's, okay, let's just create, if we have a checklist or rubric, now I have a priority of people, so I'm going to focus on these 5 people first, and then I can kind of work my way down.
So I got a couple things to say about that, but to add on to your bit there too, I think what I would say is I have hard no's. So in addition to a checklist, the first thing I do is go through everybody with my hard no's. So I just go through, let's say it's 100 resumes. A couple of my hard no's are bad colleges, too much jumping around, or too much staying at a job for like 10 years, or being in a position that I don't want someone to have ever had before having a position on my team. So it makes it really easy to go from 100 resumes down to sort of the top 30 or so by just going through everybody and just immediately rejecting all the ones that don't pass your hard no criteria. And to get even better would be to have a full checklist of things that would be even better. The other thing that I found is actually save time, even though it sounds like it's going to take more time, is video interviews and assessments. So something we do here at Workable when we're hiring someone for internally is we actually, like you said, the person applies, we then send them an email saying, great, can you please take this test, and we give them a self-schedule link to self-schedule an interview with myself. So we can automatically disqualify people right from there, which is great. And so that's from the assessment standpoint, but from the video standpoint, I just set up 5-minute video interviews. I can't tell you how many people that I've seen on paper and thought, incredible. Talked on the phone and thought, the best. And then I talked to, I see them on the video, and not just from seeing them, right, thinking what they look like, but when you interact with somebody face to face, even if there is the video screen in between, you can sort of learn a lot about that person And so I find that for that sort of top 30 list, if you can have those videos, those 5-minute videos, you're going to really be able to find out who your top 2 are, instead of finding out from that top 30 who your top 10 are, and then still having to whittle down and having hour-long interviews. So that's what I would say about that.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm gonna ask one last question here and then sort of open it up to the audience for questions. But yeah, a couple days ago on LinkedIn, there was this post that was going around. It wasn't true, yeah, it was fake news, but it was about a law that was like supposedly passed that said you could no longer write send your name or send your email, other things about yourself besides like when you're applying to a job. And it's just like sort of brought up some discussions and comments on like how you can eliminate some of the bias and as an employer in reviewing resumes or interviewing candidates. Just wanted to hear what you guys like think are some of the best ways to avoid bias in hiring candidates and choosing one candidate over another.
Sorry, you know what?
Sure, go.
Sure. All right, I think there's 2 things here when it comes to bias. I think you actually need more and more. So more number 1 is you need more people top of funnel, and more number 2 is you need more people within the funnel. If I, just naturally, all humans, if I look at 100 people, I will probably end up liking the 10 that are similar to me, just because that's how humans work, right? And so at some point in the hiring process, the candidate is going to meet me, at some point. And so whether their name was written out, their email wasn't there, their college, or all that information wasn't there, at some point I'm going to meet them. So if I'm a terrible person and I'm super biased about people, it doesn't matter what you removed, didn't remove, whatever, I'm going to be super biased against that person once they're in the interview. So if we have more people in the top of the funnel, that means that there's that funnel itself will be a more diverse funnel. And it's because of that I think, if I look at my team, we have everything you can imagine under the category of diverse. We've got that box checked. And not because we're looking for it, not because we're trying to, and not because we've blocked information out, but actually because we've included everybody in the process right from the start. I think the second piece, though, that's really important is including all other people in that hiring process. So a minute ago I said, if I had 100 people, I'd probably find the 10 that are like me, or that I like. Well, if I had him and him in the process, we'd probably find 30 people that we all like. And that means that there's now 3 different types of people in this hypothetical world. So when the hiring process includes me, the 34-year-old male manager in Boston, and also someone on my team, maybe a 26-year-old female individual contributor in Greece, well, now the people that we're getting from stage 1 to stage 2 are going to be a little bit different. And so because the top of the funnel is diverse, and because the hiring team is diverse, it means the candidates you hire are diverse. So those are the 2 things that I can't speak more highly enough. That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been whether it's a fake law or just something that, on the unconscious bias front, something that people are talking more about. It's certainly been something that we've encountered. There's more, there's certainly more tools out there where you can hide names, or within ATSs. Some ATSs default to showing profile pictures, but you can turn that off. And also, sometimes you never know. It can be funny within different applicant tracking systems, like what profile picture they choose, where sometimes it's like, I think this purposely finds the worst profile picture on the internet and then shows that. So I would definitely recommend, I do think it's probably best to turn off profile pictures on, if your ATS sometimes will scrape, the interwebs and then finds I think it's best to hide profile pictures. In terms of hiding names or email addresses, there's actually been some interesting research that's come out that's actually shown that it can actually work against your diversity initiative. So it kind of depends on how your team is wired. So for instance, now a lot of the companies that we're working with, are trying to hire from a more, create and build and hire more diverse talent. So to be honest, trying to go in blind would actually make that harder in a way. And some of the research that's coming out showing that. So it kind of depends on how the team is wired, but there's some early research that's showing if you're trying to really cultivate a diverse talent pool and build a more diverse team, going super blind may actually work against that. Now granted, if there's maybe some people involved that that don't share that perspective, then maybe there's a role for going in to try to make it more of a blind process. So it's, but I do think that, in terms of, I think the emphasis should be, I think the emphasis should really be on doing the hard work of partnering with and thinking creatively, but also deeply about connecting with easy to overlook channels, or also within a you have to really take a local approach. Like within Boston or Philly, there's local organizations that are really important to partner with that can help you actually tap into more diverse groups within different professions, really. So my preference is to work on those deeper level partnerships at the grassroots level that will lead to a deeper and more diverse talent pool than adopting more superficial methods of like pure blind, purely doing like hiding names and email addresses that, at least right now, the research isn't showing is necessarily yielding the outcomes that people are thinking that they're going to yield.
Sounds good. Yeah, I just wanted to open it up if anyone had any questions. Yep.
When you said, just to see if I heard this correctly, one of your hard no's is if somebody went to, was it a crappy college? What's your definition of a crappy college?
So the question is basically, if I have a hard no around people that went to bad colleges, how do I define a bad college? Primarily the people that are, if I don't know it, I assume it's a good college. And if I do know it and I happen to know it's a bad college because I know the people that they've let into the school, and maybe I know that we're not great people, that would be one, or any other reputation in the area. Being in Boston, a lot of people that I do hire are from the Boston area or went to school in the Boston area. So that's what I would call that. But I'll happily take.
But if it's a hard no, so you're closing yourself off to a lot of really interesting people that could have gone to that college. So you're creating your own bias right there. Right?
Yeah, so what I'm hoping there is that the bias that I created is by going to, what I'm really trying to make sure is that, especially in sales, that you're motivated. And if you're super motivated, you should be motivated in high school, middle school, and everywhere else. And so if you went to like not prestigious college, call it, then chances are you weren't as motivated as a person that did. Now, what I think is important though is I'm not saying it has to be Harvard, Yale, Princeton. It's literally anywhere. Like UMass, great school. Like all these places are great schools. So there's a select handful of places that I would look at that I would say, I know people that have, everybody I know who's been to the school that we didn't, are not people that I would want in my company. And so I do have that bias, but the general group is still a large group of colleges. It's not just like Princeton, for example.
Have you ever just piloted like something of like going against your first instinct on a bad college to see if it proved you correct or not?
Yep, no, I actually have, and that's where this kind of came from. I've hired people from,
Let's hear the college now.
yeah, no, yeah. I don't want to say it's only very small. I think it's only a small selection of colleges that I consider this. But I've hired people that haven't gone to college. I've hired people that have gotten associates, and I've hired people that have gone to colleges that I didn't think were particularly nice. And every time I'm super excited, I'm gonna be the manager to hire someone who didn't get a college degree and say, why do we do that? That's such a dumb thing we do. But every time I found that once they're in the role, there's some problem with them, and it's typically around motivation. So that's actually what drove me to have this as a hard no. And I'll push you back.
Yep.
So, regarding startups, a lot of the sort of employment packages that we would offer as your smaller growth companies is exactly that, where the emphasis is more on like the growth potential of an employee is a lot higher than maybe a different corporation, where like if the startup blows up and does really well, then that person has opportunity to really climb a ladder.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, the other side of that is maybe what you're offering sort of out of the gate is going to be lower than what offers they could potentially receive from other more established corporations. So I guess the question would be, how can you frame your offering in the best way to sort of get those top tier candidates and compete with other companies, organizations that are offering higher out of the gate but maybe less growth potential?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few different levers that a smaller startup would have to pull. So one, there certainly is the articulation of mission, of growth and opportunity, but also being crisp about it and authentic about it. So not just saying great growth opportunities or mission driven, but actually being very on point and specific to what you guys are actually doing and what the actual unique growth opportunities are. Because in one sense, if you can actually be crisp about these things, you've already differentiated yourself. The other piece is you are going to have to scrutinize your requirements, which everybody should do. But and what I would recommend is, as you're thinking about your ideal kind of profile and working your way to job description and job ed, it's great. You're going to have your laundry list of requirements. But what I would do is I would basically just separate. You just kind of have like a hard to teach column and a not so hard to teach column, and just separate stuff out in those columns. So you and your founding team have clarity around like what is the stuff that we're really not going to be able to teach, or is it we're just not going to have the bandwidth to teach, or that's really impossible to teach and somebody just has to arrive with. And sometimes in that exercise, it'll kind of open you up to, it'll open you up to things a little bit more. And so maybe your requirements aren't going to be quite as robust as somebody that, one of the firms that you thought you were competing against, but you've at least reduced some of those requirements for the job. And so one big example is just years of experience. Once somebody hits, 3 to 5 years of experience is actually, you're starting to hit a point of diminishing returns. Like, very rare, like I with our clients, like a lot of times we push against, if somebody's requiring more than 5 years of experience, and there's certainly a time and place to require more than 5 years of experience in a specific profession, but it shouldn't be the norm. Usually, after you start overpaying once you start getting past that 5 years. But then you certainly have, you have your story, you have your mission, you have your growth opportunities, you have equity packages that you can develop, and then you also just have, but at the same time, it's not for everybody, and that's where I think what Mike was talking about in terms of being clear. I would say the push-pull issues. There's things about you that's going to pull people towards you, but then you can also be honest. I kind of like using in job ads, we've thrown this language in job ads, like highlighting, hey, this is going to be an exciting opportunity for you to learn and grow in these ways, but this isn't for everybody. Like if you're looking for this, you're not going to necessarily get this here. And people will appreciate that honesty, and the right people kind of actually like to press into that pushback, like, oh, it's not for everybody, well, I'll show you that this is for me, and then they're there.
I just want to add one thing to that if I could. The other thing I think is really important, and it goes back to something I mentioned earlier about Salesforce sending thank yous beforehand, is when you're that startup company that maybe is offering less than what somebody else is offering, though you have this huge upside, people will move to go to a company for the person. And that's what I've definitely found in my experience. So here's a couple of tips I have on that front. So one of them is if you start the interview and you say, hey, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to talk to you about the interview process. from pre-me to post-me. Second, we're going to talk about me, the team, and the company. It'll take you 10 minutes, but in those 10 minutes, you will answer all of their questions. And now, instead of your answers to their questions being almost sounding potentially defensive or inauthentic, you're getting right up front saying, here's the deal, here's what I'm like, here's what I manage the team, here are very specifics about how I manage the team. I'm going to be your manager. And they go, okay, phew, this is somebody I want to work with. Here's the team, here's what they're like. Okay, wow, it's exciting. And they made how much money last year? That's wild. Here's the company, here's where we're going. You're like, wow, I can't believe the market is so difficult, and you guys have managed to power through. There's so much opportunity here. Because that's what they're telling their friends when they come home. When they call their mom to say, Mom, I just interviewed someplace, and she goes, what is it? They're not saying like, oh, just here's the job description. Hopefully figure it out. They're saying, it's amazing, my boss really cares about the people, and the team has incredible people that are really creative, and yeah, they want to have fun, but they really want to work hard. And what's better than that is the company is going so many places, and yes, I know the pay is, where it should be, but I'm going to make a ton of money here, and I'm going to have a blast. So I think really selling that in the beginning actually will get people following you.
Yeah, any other?
Yep.
So curious about any trends that you're seeing back to the higher ed kind of component of it. So I teach in academia, but I'm not an academic, and I find myself questioning higher ed's ability to kind of provide the tools for candidates to be successful. And to your point, yes, the signaling is still there, right? If you're accepted to Harvard, that probably says something about you, right? And it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I kind of wonder what you're saying and what your maybe prediction, right, over time might be around kind of that signaling and academia's ability to provide the tools versus just like experience. So thoughts?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the signaling is getting, I guess, in a way diffused, right? Even with the well-known controversy of basically, people ending up on getting basketball scholarships that are shorter than I am. So there's the extreme example, but we're also seeing it with some of our clients that have really treated kind of had a very traditional approach to how they treat college and specific colleges, especially on the consulting side of things. Really starting to loosen that up, especially if you're really trying to build a diverse talent pool. There's ways you can actually use colleges, and if you know the different demographics at different colleges, you can actually, in a way, target specific colleges or try to actually source people from specific colleges that may have certain diversity statistics that you can actually, or if we also bring these schools into play that maybe, that may not be a Harvard or Yale or Ivy League, but we know we'll also be able to pull some diverse talent from. And then actually what starts to become more important is, maybe they went to a specific school, but then they had a consulting, they spent time at this consulting firm. So then the experience starts actually becoming more of a signal than the actual specific institution. So I just think with all the alternative options out there in terms of getting courses you can take online, additional certificates, as well as just some of the press that's come out and some that in a way can cheapen degrees or cheapen what used to be a very prestigious degree. I do think that signaling is getting disrupted, and we are seeing that trend, which as a recruiter to some extent, or as we're recruiting for these firms, in a way it makes it, I'm in favor of it because it opens things up more, right? And you're not facing, well, they didn't go to, I'm not seeing an Ivy League on there, like forget about it. Like we can be a little bit more creative. We can be a little bit more creative and not just be banging our heads against the wall saying, well, we're not getting anybody from this specific set of criteria. Maybe we should look elsewhere, Well, now people are being a little bit more primed to look elsewhere. So I think it's a good thing, and I do see what the traditional signaling being disrupted.
Agreed. And something I'll say to that is actually, what I would recommend though is you look at what is the other experience, what are their life experiences. So like I mentioned to Amy earlier, I've hired people that did not go to college, and they don't have problems working. Like they can do the same job, right? It's not I agree. I do not think that colleges prepare you for the jobs that you go in at all. When my school asked me for money, I say for what? Like what did I get? But there's the interpersonal skills that are impossible to teach, and that can really quickly become problems. So, for example, someone that hasn't gone to school but maybe served in the military, or somebody who hasn't gone to school or did something like Peace Corps, something where they had to interact with people to get their job done. What I found is that people that maybe just went right into careers, that they just lack some of the interpersonal conflict resolution skills, just awkwardness a little bit sometimes in the office. So I as you know, steer away from it. But I would not if they had other experience that showed that they could actually deal with other people.
I think one thing that's interesting is if you look at the hiring practices around and the recruiting practices around developers. I feel like things in a way follow how companies are, like in a way the leading indicator is how companies recruit engineers right now. And maybe at some point there will be a different a profession that may be more in demand than engineers. But right now it seems like engineers and where companies sink a ridiculous amount of budget is in recruiting the greatest, the best engineers and so forth. So both in the practices and the criteria that companies use for recruiting engineers, I think that's like the leading indicator, and then it kind of starts bleeding into other areas of hiring. And you see it all the time with hiring engineers. It's not about what school did you go to in many cases. It's about like, what did you actually ship? What's in your GitHub, basically? What have you shipped? What have you done? So I see things following that route when it comes to signaling and becoming much more of an emphasis on what you've actually done, including as, obviously W-2 employment is still the most popular form of how people are working, but as things do continue to go more and more towards freelancers and so forth, like for freelancers, it's not about really where you went to school, it's about your portfolio of work, what you've done for other clients, and I think things will continue to trend that way.
Any last questions?
Yeah. I find that the tech scene in Boston and just in general, there's a lot that's said, like, of what they value, but when you look at what they do, like, I want to congratulate you, because I do think, I think a lot of them are not, if you read about successful companies, one thing you'll always read about is that the importance of neurodiversity, lots of women employees, lots of diversity, lots of inclusion, lots of women in leadership. And so I think I know around hiring, because I'm so trained myself, there's a lot of talk with this, but then when you see what companies do, it's mostly if you go to these things, the same white guys that are always in the room, right? Even from inception of building companies. So, and my comment to you, and I'm a former educator too, is I agree that higher ed can't even keep up with the needs of the workforce and training people. And a lot of the skills that you do need, it's very hard to teach communication, collaboration, social, relational intelligence, emotional intelligence, leading with emotional credibility, or even operating with team intelligence. So you know, of course, everybody wants somebody who has those skills and went to like an A-list college, but like, good luck with that. Hi, I'm Earth, have we met? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so sometimes I feel like there's a lot of, like, the search of perfect is the enemy of the good enough candidate. Somebody who went to a boot camp, maybe through General Assembly or Startup Coalition or some other organization, you know, that's, so I was wondering, do you find that organizations are more looking toward boot camps and alternative education providers or alternative educated trainers, or perhaps organizations that work with, let's say, women returning or middle-aged people that want to transition into tech? Or, because I feel like when they source candidates, they're like, a lot of tech companies are just like, they're like a dumb phone before the iPhone, and they're fighting in the red ocean with like the sharks for like the little chunk of meat, but they overlook, you know, women, minorities, people who want to do return ships, you know, middle-aged people who might have transitioned in tech and have already had like $1 billion worth of education and aren't going to go back to an Ivy League college because that's not even particularly valuable or relevant to them in, you know, whatever that. So can you speak to that, of what you're doing to source these? Because I feel like the future of hiring, it's less about content, but like trying to figure out where these people are grassroots. Like, there's a big organization here called Work Without Limits that just specializes hiring people with disabilities, but a lot of people don't even know that they exist. And they're people of all, you know, trades and skills, knowledge and abilities. So trying to work with grassroots organizations where you can source different talent, and this way you're not competing. You're all, like, they need to, I feel like their recruitment strategy needs to be like the iPhone 1. You gotta be swimming in the blue ocean, so you're not competing for all those traditional candidates, especially if you're a small startup.
Yeah.
And you can't offer all the bells and whistles and, you know, pizza parties and craft beer.
Yeah. So I think the first part of it actually has to do with, so I'll basically take the which is first, the chicken or the egg. You need to have people with diverse backgrounds in your company to truly understand what it takes to get people that have diverse backgrounds. I can go to 100 different meetups and I'm still not going to understand what it's like to be a woman. I will not. Right? And even if I drop, what's the movie with Mel Gibson where he drops the hairdryer into the bathtub and whatever. But the point is, something I'm really, one of the reasons I've actually joined Workable is because in the exec team, 60% of the people on that team are female, right? And that's obviously one bit of the diverse culture we have here. But in doing that, when I'm interviewing people, I will come to the team and say, oh, I thought this was interesting or that was weird. And they'll say, actually, I really like that because of X, Y, or Z. I'll say, oh, I didn't think of things that way. So just because part of my hiring team is more diverse, I'm actually understanding more about the people that we bring in. And I'll go back to my answer before, which is, where do you find these people? You have to have a way of, you have to advertise in as many places as possible, because maybe we're gonna find out in 3 years that, I don't know, Indeed, for some reason, skews 18 to 35-year-old white male. I don't know the answer to that, right? But we might find that. But if I have my job in 30 locations, I'm decreasing my chance of not having that pool. And lastly, the other thing is actually going to those events. So we go to a lot of women in tech events here at our company. We're passionate about that event. So because we're going to those events, people are seeing Workable at those events, and then when they go to hire and they see that we're hiring for some position, they're keen to come on board.
Yeah, I mean, for startups, so there can be a bit of a catch-22, right? If you have, let's just say you're at a stage where it's just you, maybe you're the CTO or you're the non-technical co-founder and you have a CTO. And you're trying to ship something and launch something quickly. In some respect, it can be harder for a small startup to hire somebody straight out of a boot camp that is going to need a lot more time to ramp up and be able to contribute. Whereas a larger, more established startup, maybe they're 100 employees, or maybe they're as big as Facebook, especially somebody as big as Facebook, or maybe even Workable. How many employees do you guys have?
300.
You have 300 employees. How big is the engineering team?
100.
100. So a 100-person engineering team can absorb and have a more robust strategy for bringing some people from boot camp into their organization, getting them ramped up and having them contribute. Whereas if you're a smaller venture, getting somebody straight from boot camp, if you need somebody to contribute instantly, is a difficult task. Now, somebody that went through boot camp and has spent 2 or 3 years and has made significant contributions to products that are now in the wilderness, it's a different story. So you kind of have to take that context into account. And in the other pieces, in one respect, basically, experienced female engineers or experienced minority engineers are in such demand right now that they are getting, they probably actually, in many cases, maybe getting more outreach from recruiters than engineers that may look like me, even though I'm not an engineer. We've worked with companies that have told us we need, our next engineer needs to be female, and then we'll say, well, since we're sourcing candidates for you, we're gonna be coming across male engineers. So through the tools we use, we can put a preference towards female, but we don't want to just blanketly exclude, kind of do go the reverse exclusion. But I'll say from those searches, we may in some cases have gone through 500 candidates. These are passive candidates that you're reaching out to. And it's a very small percentage that's actually being truly open to chatting. So I think that you really need to understand your specific context. You're gonna have to take a multi-channel approach, and you're also especially gonna have to go and look at passive sourcing, reaching out to people that are not, that haven't necessarily applied.
Traditional candidates.
Yeah.
Great job. Let's give a hand to our